He's playing like a man possessed. Rusty also took it one step further this week.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby union show. Welcome back.
It is that rugby union show, and we are in the midst of the autumn internationals. We've already seen 2 rounds. We're on to the third. A lot said after last weekend. We're not going to be terribly long tonight, but if you do have a comment or a question, drop it on below, and Sim and I will certainly attend to it. It is, I think, a bigger match than most might pay credence to. Sim. South Africa against Italy. We've already seen them in SA for 2 matches, and I have this abiding memory of Loftus where they just wouldn't go away. And then I look at this Italian team. We'll take a look at it, and they are actually strengthened. They're stronger, and they're coming off the back of a win against Australia, so they'll be confident as well and thinking, is this a really good chance to get the Springbok team that has got a bit of experimentation going on, under the cosh, under pressure, and who knows what might happen. Good evening, good to see you. And the Italians, not to be written off.
No, not at all. The thing about this game, I think when the Boks were looking at this game, at the beginning of the year, I think the thinking would have been, okay, it's in between the 2 biggest games on tour, which is obviously France and Ireland. So that's kind of like where you're going to get your breather. And so obviously maybe the mentality is a bit like, oh yeah, well, this is when we get our breather, and they need a breather. You have to be honest. You have to be fair to the Boks. After last weekend's war, they do need, just a week off to sort of recharge and sort of get them back, get the bumps and bruises out of the way before, they go again, as it were, against Ireland next week. But the catch is, like you said, this is an Italian side which, is now flying high with confidence because they've just beaten the Wallabies. Wallabies who beat the Springboks at Ellis Park, which, that already kind of like, if that doesn't warn you that, things could go a little pear-shaped, then that should. And then obviously over and above that, there's the fact that I think when they came here last time, Gonzalo Quesada kept saying they were missing 16 or 17 frontline players. I think he was taking a bit of poetic license to say that many, but it probably was around, say, maybe, like between 8 and 10 or whatever. Either way,
around 7.
Yeah, either way, like, for a team like Italy, that's a lot, especially when they come up against the Boks. So, I mean, I think this is why it's a tricky game for the Springboks. It's just that, if they a little bit off, there are going to be issues if they're a little bit off, and if they're not quite sort of switched on in terms of what they need to do. They've gone and made big changes. It's 11 changes to last week's starting lineup. That's a lot by anyone's estimation. And then they've kind of like, Russie's gone and done Russie things. We'll talk about it a bit later in terms of the sort of like some of the experimentation, or the big experimental point in the whole squad. We're going to talk about that a bit later. But yeah, it's an interesting game in that it not only will it test sort of the Boks' ability to stay on task. It'll also test the Boks' depth. We've been talking about the Springbok depth for such a long time. It's quite interesting that Italy came here, missing 7 or 8 frontline players, and ran the Boks sort of close at Loftus. Sort of close always sounds a bit weird to me. It's like 42 points beating. But, for them, it was, running the Boks close. They ran them sort of close. Now the Italians, the boot is, the shoes is on the other foot in terms of they're the ones who are stronger in terms of, their team, and the Boks are the ones who kind of like are using their second stringers. So it'll be interesting to see, how then those sort of two sort of realities or narratives collide.
Yeah, sorry, we got Hadidas that stay up late in Joburg. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's the weather. Paul was saying I'm keeping them as pets. I'm not. But I'm going to look at very quickly before we take a look at those two team sheets. And Andre, thanks for the comment. We will take a look at that side. Before we take a look at the team sheets, I'd like to compare the two Italy teams that we saw in South Africa. And yeah, you said running them close at Loftus. And they did, because they came out and they scored 3 second half tries, if I'm not mistaken, and looked very, very strong towards the back end of that game. And there was also a try which was disallowed after the hooter had sounded as well. It was a 42-24. It was like that inverted score game. And it could have been quite a bit closer, but there were moments where the Boks were uncomfortable. They were uncomfortable at the breakdown. They were uncomfortable stopping the Italian maul. I think the one
Yeah, they
maul
conceded
took
a
the,
maul try,
yeah,
which really pissed them off.
it
Like
traveled. It traveled.
The Bucks are talking about that for a full week. Like, Jesus,
Yeah.
how could you do that? It was
But like
like
30 meters, some like maybe 30 meters, maybe
no,
more. It was
it was a proper maul. It was a proper maul.
a
Wasn't quite,
proper,
wasn't quite as long as the one against Japan by the Bucks
yeah,
in 2019, but it
the
was
World Cup.
still, yeah, no, it had roller skates on.
Yeah, so there was that. And then last week, they switched it up because the Australians weren't really giving them that much opportunity in terms of just clean breaks to score tries. And then it all fell on the fly half. And what was it? I think 9 points kicked in the first half. That just kept them in the hunt, despite Aussies scoring 2 tries. And it was the goal kicking that it came down to, and just a little bit of discipline that sometimes I think we tend to underestimate when I do. I'm just, being honest here. I always think of an Italian side pretty much on the same level as an Argentine side, that when things get frustrating, that's when the cards come, that's when the discipline slips. And that's not at all what we saw last week against the Wallabies. I thought they were really, really good. And even though it finished the very narrow score line, the Aussies also got that runaway try, which probably shouldn't have been a try as well.
Yeah,
So
question
yeah,
mark.
yeah, but I like to juxtapose these two performances because it was two different teams in terms of player personnel, but also two different ways of going about their business, which you have to commend them for.
Look, it's always very simple. If you consider the inferior team in a contest, there are certain sort of non-negotiables in terms of what you need to do well. The first is obviously you've got to contest at the rucks because you're not guaranteed that you're going to dominate at the set piece, which you shouldn't. So I wouldn't imagine the Italians are going to dominate the box at the scrums. It would be interesting to see if they do the rolling maul trick again on the box. I suspect not, simply because the box were, simply because they caught the box a bit cold in that sense. But then again, it's a different Bok pack, so maybe that's where they chance lies. But
Yeah,
essentially, where do you make the game competitive? You kick well out of hand and at poles. You contest at the rucks. You defend well, and you get those things right, then the question mark becomes, are the box sort of, will the box find solutions to those problems, which, obviously problems that the Aussies couldn't find. And by, solutions they couldn't find, you sit and you look at the French game with against the Box, where the Box went one man down, and
mm,
basically that's what they did. They kept solving problem after problem after problem that the French presented until they won. And now it's almost like a totally different team. You then have to ask, does a guy with 5 or 6 caps, or maybe even one cap, sort of turn around and find, does he have capacity to find, to play well for himself in terms of trying to keep himself in the conversation within the box extended box squad,
yeah,
and find capacity to solve problems the same way that the two-time World Cup winners, rugby championship winners, and were able to last week. So that's kind of where the big sort of gray areas are going to be in this match this weekend. I think regarding the breakdown, I think the other thing that the Boks were incensed about was how they got bested at the breakdown, which might explain why someone like Marco van Staden is starting at 8. It's to have sort of two fetchers, as it were. Also because you haven't got a Malcolm Marks at hooker, which then means you do need to sort of have more than just one sort of open side type player. You need a guy who's gonna try to steal, and then you need Sia to do what Sia does best, which is kind of like to spoil rug ball and to clean up rug ball. And so it looks like the Boks have sort of taken precautions to sort of deal with some of the issues from when the Italians were here in July. But we'll see how well those sort of proposed solutions are going to work on Saturday. Have you muted?
Oh,
Because I can't
it's
hear you.
because I was coughing. I'm such a Madela. Yes, such an old man. But Andre, thanks very much. I was saying we can get into that team because we're already delving into the pack. But he says the side looks hot, young and fast. Love the back line. He says let the kids play. And yeah, there is a lot of experimentation. There are a lot of changes. There is a youthful look about one or two of those positions, especially when you look at Zachary Porthen coming in at tight end prop. I mean, jeepers, for the coach to tell you in no uncertain terms that I see something in you and I trust you, that is huge. I mean, I just didn't expect him to have a start again. And Ben Jason Dixon, injuries scuppered his season last year. Jean Klein, likewise, also sitting out a couple of test matches because of injury. And yeah, I mean, it's I think a decent pack, but I think the magic of the Springbok pack is, like you say, some on the bench. But it's that selection of Marco van Staden at number 8. Johan Grobelaar is the only hooker, really. Do you think Marco's played enough now for the Boks at hooker? Because I can see that for Rassie, it is a long-term plan thing, like Andre Esterhazen. It's not the first time if he does get a chance to throw in at the line-out. We saw that at the World Cup. We just haven't seen him do it for quite some time. It looked like maybe it was a short-term solution for then, but now it's starting to look pretty long-term. And, another of those Andre Esterhazen type players who, for the long term, might yield real dividends for the Boks.
Yeah, Rassi did. To answer your direct question, which was, do I think Van Staden has played long enough at hooker to sort of be entrusted with that? The simple answer is no. He hasn't played enough games at hooker. But from what I hear from Springbok insiders, apparently all he does, all he has done this tour or when he's been with the Boks is to work on his throwing. So in practice he's ready. But also in theory, based on his practicing, he's ready. But obviously, the proof, as I always say, will be in the last 20 minutes of this test match, because they do want to see him play at hooker. It's not like one of those Johan Grobelaar is going to go into the 78th, 79th minute. No, they actually want to see him play at hooker for about 20 minutes. And that'll be, it is part of an ongoing experiment. So I'll explain Rassi's experiment or his rationale for why he wants to see this experiment through. Because you sit there and you're like, well, why don't you just make your life easier, get another hooker? And that's what the rest of us would do. But essentially, it looks like Marco van Staden finds himself in a similar sort of place to Andre Esterhuizen, which is, you're a really good player, but there's a really good player in front of you. In Andre's case, it was Damien Dialende. In Marco van Staden's case, right here, right now, it's the captain and Siya Kolisi. So that then, Rassi sits there and he goes, I want this guy in the 23, because Rassi's also gone and done the maths of,
Yeah.
okay, how many scrums do you get? How many lineouts do you get in the match? And how many rucks do you get? And how many carries do you have in the match?
He was listing his carries the other
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
So he went and he said, okay, there's probably about 20 scrums, I think scrums and lineouts put together, probably 20 to 30 max. And he says there are about 200 rucks in a game. And he says, carries, I don't know, but loads. obviously rugby is literally a carrying game. And so his thinking is Escom or Marco van Staden does those things particularly well. There's two things he does particularly well, which is his work at the right, at the breakdown, at the rucks, and his carries. So he's sitting there and he's like, I've got a guy who I'm not getting involved at all. So how do I involve him? So he sacrifices a hooker and then he has him as the backup hooker. So you can have him almost on the field at the same time as he's got the hooker so that he can be another sort of pair of hands to deal with those many racks that we need to sort of get involved with, and also those many carries that we're going to need. Remember, the box base almost everything they do on battle stats, and so what they want is people flying into those battles or those rucks. A bit like a guy like Marco van Staden does. And so that's kind of like, that's why they're so desperate to sort of turn him into a hooker. It's to make sure that he can crack the nod consistently in the 23, much like the hybrid experiment has done for Andre's days. And obviously for totally different reasons in terms of the positioning, but
Yeah.
it's basically the same principle at work.
Now that we're talking about hookers, let's look at the other hooker at center, Ethan, alongside Kane and Moody. Very excited about this. And you heard it here first, folks. That's what we're calling that new combination, Moody hooker, playing at 13 and 12. But I'm very excited to see Ethan have a go in his favorite number jersey. Likewise, Kanan loves 13 more than any other position. Very happy to see Edolf van der Merwe back. He's still outscoring the number of tests he's played. Damien settled at fullback. Andre gets a run. I think he played against Italy when they played in those two tests. And I think it started in Port Elizabeth as well.
Was it Loftus?
At Loftus, yeah. But Morne van der Berg also started at Loftus, and he scored 2 tries in that match. So, it almost looks like, and I don't want to be disrespectful to these guys because I'm sure each of them fight very hard for that jersey, but this seems to be in bits and pieces the change over team. There's no Apele Lefasi, so we're not playing around with the fullbacks at the moment, but something tells me that it would have been a bit of a toss-up there had he been fit as well. But really excited to see that young centre pairing, and that for me is a look towards the future, the next World Cup and beyond.
Let's tell you a story about the two young centers. My reliable information from the Bok camp is that they've been playing together as a pairing, as the opposition center pairing, and apparently they have been an absolute nightmare to play against because they are apparently borderline telepathic in terms of how they just like can dovetail off each other. So if things go really well, we'll see what we haven't obviously been privy to in terms of what they've been able to do in practice. Apparently, they've been an absolute menace. Not only are they like that on the field, apparently off the field, they're quite tight as well, and they're quite close in age. Ethan's 22, and Kanan Moody is just 23. Sort of like men of similar build and men of similar almost everything. If you think about them, even as players, guys who just are calm, composed, and to sort of BMT. And so it's quite interesting. I mean, if it is true that they've been drawn to each other as guys as well, it's quite interesting to look at it. But now I must tell you a funny story about Ethan Hooker. So he was up for media, I think 2 days ago, and I thought, we're not asking him questions. We're just going to get audio. Let me do a story on Ethan Hooker, which I think came out this morning, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, I went to Jean de Villiers because all of us keep saying his career is unfolding, like Jean de Villiers is, because he started out on the wing and then he worked his way back to his original position. And actually, ironically enough, both of them actually made their debuts at center in their position and then went out to the wing. And then, now they, going back again. So anyway, I phoned Jean and I say to Jean, hey, what do you make of all this chat about? He says, no. My mother told me last year already that this Ethan Hooker boy is bloody good, eh? And he reminds me of you. And he reminds me of you.
Wow.
So listen, if a lady who gave birth to a future, test centurion who would also be captain of the Springboks, reckons
Yay.
that our similarities. Who are the rest of us to be sitting around and trying to argue this one out? But
Yeah.
funnily enough, the last stupid thing I'm going to say about Ethan Hooker is one of our readers. I'm not sure what the thinking was there. He says, "Yeah, isn't Hooker normally a number two in rugby?" I was just like, "Jeez, mate, please, no,
Oh
just
no,
don't,
noise.
don't."
But if it's true what you say, and John de Villiers' mother sees similarities between Ethan Hooker and him, that means Ethan's not allowed to go and visit John's mom. Because yes, he was a nightmare when he was a lighty. That guy. Let's very quickly. I thought we were going to talk for half an hour, and it's already flown by. But I think Paul, you've got the Italy team as well. Just a quick look at that. We have spoken about it. Number of changes made there, and Sim. I also love the fact that we're playing
X,
in.
before we go there,
Yeah.
can I raise a small point on our selection?
Goeie.
That thing of not having three front rowers on the bench, I won't
Yes.
lie to you. So I've been living with this theory, and it got shot down when we had Jan Hendrik Wessels and obviously Thomas du Toit available. Hang on, wait. Does this mean we could one day sort of like amp up the bomb squad by having just two front rowers,
Yeah.
um, just two front rowers on the bench, and those front rowers being Jan Hendrik Wessels, who can play one and two, and then a swing prop like Thomas du Toit can play one and three. And guys are like, no, 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 you have to nominate three guys on the bench who who are going to be front rowers. This is obviously to prevent stupid things like uncontested scrums and whatnot. Because my
Yeah.
thinking was,
Yeah.
if you could do that, take a front rower off, not have a front rower, then what you could do is you could sneak in Andre Esterhuizen to sort of engineer a weird sort of 7-1 split with your number 22 being Andre Esterhuizen, who's also, the hybrid. But anyway, long story short, it was shot down. But here we are with two front rowers. It's Gerard Steenekamp and Volcano. And then again, I wondered, are we allowed to do that? So maybe they did nominate that. They did nominate that. Obviously, Markov and Staden would be the hooker replacement, and that's
Yes.
how they've gotten away with it. Look, they've got Jaco paper on their books, which means
Well,
they
Sim,
don't
I mean,
they don't do that stuff without checking. Do you know what I mean?
So I completely get your point, and I wonder, to go down the rabbit hole, if that wasn't the whole deal for Reed thing, because it looked like he was going to try Rassi and extract a couple more seasons out of Dion. Not even talking about 1 or 2 seasons like a Villy Leroux maybe. It looked like there was a
Yeah.
bit of a more long-term plan there, and I think that one of the reasons was literally that you could easily switch between 8 and hooker, or flank and hooker if you needed, 6 and hooker if you needed him to as well. And when
But
he
with
played
Diona
in
was
that World
easier.
Cup,
With
I thought
Diona was
there
easier
is
simply
something.
because he'd been a hooker before.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
with
No. You're definitely onto
look,
something.
the bigger point I'm trying to make is I didn't know you were allowed to only have two front rowers on the bench. I labored under the misapprehension that you had to have three. So clearly, by picking this side, that means you are allowed to do that. And the other thing for me is we were talking about all the things that will encourage the Italians to be a bit pissed with us,
Yeah,
or to feel a bit more, to feel confident against us. There's a couple of things that'll make them feel a bit pissed with us. And not nominating a full, they coach will probably go to them and say they don't even think you deserve a full front row on the bench. They
mm,
think they're going to be
mm,
so dominant. That's going to happen,
yeah,
and it's going to be backed up with that botched kickoff in Gqeberha, where they're going to be like, yeah, you remember they called you in.
yeah,
They
yeah,
they made it
yeah,
deliberately botched the
yeah.
kickoff so they could scrum
They
you as
didn't even
COs.
go 10
Oh,
meters.
and they tried that silly mall, in
Mm.
phase play. So this is all
Embarrassing you.
like more of like this is all kind of like basically turning this from just a rest weekend, if you want to call
Well,
it
here's
that, between France and Ireland, into a one-sided grudge match in
well,
terms of the
question on
Italians.
that front. Don't you think that because I also, like you, believe that you have to start in, well, you have to have a match 23 that includes 6 nominated front rowers. That's what I've always thought, at least since the
That's what
changes
I
came
thought.
in. But
That's
but
what I
but
thought.
but isn't it that they've actually nominated Marco van Staden as a front rower, and it doesn't really matter where he plays, but you've
Yeah,
got the guy listed.
I think it's a nomination. You've got it 100% right because I thought you had to have physically, the
Yes,
guy at number 16, 17, and 18. But clearly, it's a nomination thing. You've got to nominate that these guys are going to look. With Russie, unfortunately, all of us are having to learn the law book because, well, it will be broken or
yeah.
bent or like that. That's you know
The
that's
boundaries shall be pushed.
that's where we live. And I must admit, I sat there and I thought, hang on, wait, is he allowed to do that? But the one thing that kind of like uh, you know made me think, what, don't even run hard at it, asking all these questions. Just go. There is a small matter of they've got Yaku Paper, an ex international ref guy who gave us the scrum of a mark, and also he's sort of a job description is legal advisor, or sorry,
Yeah,
laws advisor. So that basically means they did think it through. But yeah, perceptions wise though, I'm not sure it looks particularly great to the Italians. They will be feeling a bit slighted, and they
they
will go
will.
will go into the match with a little bit of that.
Yeah, I'm slightly jealous that I'm not on this trip as well because I love the idea of them playing at the Allianz Stadium, the home of the old lady, Alessandro Del Piero, Gigi Buffon. It's a haloed ground in football terms, but these guys, this Azzurri team, will get a chance to try and get a special result for the Italian team. Are there any surprises there? I mean, there are a couple of players who I thought were really, really good. The guy in the picture, Monty Ioane, I thought had a fantastic game. He ran at Australia all day. Eventually, managed to get that try, towards the end as well, and it was crucial for them. Absolutely love the way that Ziani, the number 7, goes about his business as well. The two Canone brothers, both of them, do put in a lot. Andrea Zabonin at lock, very, very physical guy. And, I still think not a lot of experience in the front row, and maybe a little bit more experience on the bench when you look at that Italian side. That's because, they will be very wary that the stronger Springbok front row is going to be playing off the bench. Your take on that team?
Yeah, well, it looks like they've prepared for the stronger Bok front row to be playing off the bench. If you look at the likes of Ferrari and Spagnolo and Bartolomeo as the front row on the bench. Look, I mean, it's a very good squad. Ange Capuozzo is back.
Yeah.
I think he'd broken his leg, so he's back. Louis Liner is a classical right winger, big, physical, and he loves a try or two, as last weekend showed. Those two centers are absolute animals, and a wonderful combination. So when you've got
Yeah,
centers as young as ours,
I
it's
rate
gonna
them.
be it's gonna be a very, very big day at the or it's going to be a long day at the office if they're not, if our youngsters are not playing particularly well. You've spoken about Ioane. I think BC, what he's really
Yeah.
good for at the moment is it feels like it's the kicking. Zuliani was an absolute pain in the ass at the breakdowns
Yes.
last time when they were here. Of course, Ross Vincent went
Yeah,
to
he's a
went to Bishop.
beast of a man.
Yeah, and he went to Bishops. I think he went to school around about the same time as Sasha, so that should be
Uh,
interesting. And
do,
then
do, do, do
Andreas
you think he,
and
do you think he
Andreas
tells all
Zambon,
the Italians he went to Bishops?
exactly. Andreas Zambonin was a big part of why the Italians gave the box such a difficult time, at the lineouts with Nicola Cannoni. I think he might have been the captain at the time when they came down here. He worked his socks
Yeah.
off and he was physical and he just wouldn't go away. And so it is a very good team. Look, you have to admit whether you like it or not, they've probably got the lesser bench. And I guess maybe, if you look at our front row, I think it's got the sum total of 12 caps between them. I think six for Boyan Fenter, five for Johan Grobbelaar, and just the one for young Zach Porthen.
Right.
So obviously very, very inexperienced, but obviously typically in these situations, you'll find that where the Boks are inexperienced, they probably have a higher ceiling in terms of what they might
Mm,
achieve in future in the game. But we are not, this game's not being played in the future, a year or two from now. It's being played 2 days. It's being played 2 days from now. So they're going to have to deal, with guys that are probably in terms of their international education as rugby players is that much more advanced. And so that should make it a very, very interesting sort of situation for young, talented Boks up against experienced and really good sort of professionals in the Italians. Some of them being out and out actual talents, like real talents. It's gonna be fun to watch. It's gonna be a much better
yeah.
game than we think it's going to be. It's just that that maybe it won't feel like a better game if we lose.
No, that's true. And I also don't know when last the Springboks went to a test match where they had fewer caps than the opposition. That just doesn't happen under Rassie Erasmus. So it's going to be a true test for the guys who, are still young, especially young guy like a Zach Porthen. I want to quickly wrap this up, but Paul's been busy. Yes, I don't know, hey, these Welsh guys. He went and found some AI thing which has predicted the World Cup winners until 2063, I think it is. I don't trust AI, but I found it quite funny, Paul. I took a look at it and I looked at the names, and there are a couple. Well, there's two teams that are going to hate you very much. At least going to hit the supercomputer, I suppose, for revealing the winners. Because let's have a look at this. New Zealand, right? That's 2027. Don't believe you, but let's go on. And then it says England. That's in the USA. Who does it say? It says they beat South Africa for that following one. And then South Africa then follow up with the World Cup win of their own in 2035, beating the Kiwis in the final. This is like an online sangoma. How's that? And then New Zealand in 2039, right? Followed by Australia beating South Africa again in a final. England beating Ireland in a final. New Zealand in 2051. So far there should be two names that really jump out at you as having not had the opportunity to win a World Cup, because again, England come in beating Australia in 2055, according to the supercomputer. The Kiwis back in it. And then finally, when it ends, 2063, the Irish claim their first ever Rugby World Cup trophy. The French, I guess they give up on rugby. They all become footballers. I don't know. They just stop
No,
trying.
they probably become poets and philosophers, which is what they really are. They just give up on rugby paper because listen. If you can't win against 14 men, what do you expect? Are you even a rugby
Hey.
team at the moment? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, that's very, 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 very harsh. I'm going to get a call from one or two Frenchmen I know who might be watching. Paul, yeah, absolute lunacy, that thing. Craziness. I think the Springboks will win a couple more World Cups than that. But Sim, it's going to be a lacquer match, like you say. It's exciting. I love to see new talent, young guys get the opportunity. But I also agree that it could be a bit of a turning point on this tour. If we take them too lightly, we're going to pay a very heavy price, and you don't want to have tails between your legs, heads down, going into Dublin against a team from Ireland which will be fired up, which will want to prove a point, and will want to reclaim the Cranberry song as well.
Well, the irony is that if we did lose, it would almost guarantee that we'd win in Dublin, simply because the Boks would be A, pissed, and B, they would be back, they would be seen as underdogs all over again, which can be a place we like entirely too much to play our rugby games from. But I don't know. I feel like this Bok team has kind of like turned the corner in terms of I used to call that reliance on being sort of underdogs to be able to perform, sort of loser mentality. I think the
Mm,
Boks have genuinely shed that tag. I've watched a few sort of big games that have happened when they were actually favorites to win, and they've gone on to do the job that was that was needed to get done. So I don't think they still have that problem, even though I say ironically it would work if it would help if they lost to Italy. That what I'm really excited about is what I really like about the Boks is that when they talk about building depth, everybody talks about building depth because that's part of your mandate as a rugby coach. But I think there are only two teams that do it well, and that's France and the Springboks. In that they throw you into live games. By live games, I'm talking about they don't throw you into the third rubber after they've won the first two tests. They throw you in when there's still, spoils to be fought for. And this Italy game may have seemed something approaching a dead rubber before coming, going to Europe, but it
mm.
has now taken on the proportions of a really important game. The moment they beat the Wallabies, and then you throw in all the other sort of psychological little bits and pieces about who's pissed off with whom, who's still unhappy with what, and you suddenly have a situation where all this depth that we've been talking about for however long, the last year or two, it gets tested in a real game in which, for once, our team is the less experienced side, and. So I look forward to this game on that account where, our depth is going to get a real test, and it'll be interesting to see what actually happens, after the 18 minutes is over.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about it as the weekend draws closer, and it's a good kickoff time as well. So looking forward to that. Julian is asking us for a score prediction. Jules, why don't you give us a score prediction? Because he always wants to sit in the back there and just like needle. Remember back in the day on Facebook, you could poke. You could. That's what Jules is doing. He's
Jeez, man,
poking.
but I don't
You
have
just
any
sound
credibility. You guys are the ones that
Come,
always say.
Jules. Come, Jules. Come. Give us a prediction.
I say it's going to be Boxed by by 7. I don't think it's going to be as close as everyone has. I think it's
That's pretty close.
That's very close. Box by
It's
seven is
literally
scary.
that's incredibly close in terms of the
Boxed
history
by
between
7.
the two countries.
Okay, cool. Box by seven. I was still gonna say, 13 to 15 point margin.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go with the 12.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
All right.
terrible at these things.
Yeah, you see, Jules, you start something, you're going to have to finish it off. Thanks very much for that. It's a big match. The Azzurri, as I said, coming off a really, really good win against Australia, their second ever against Australia in their history. The first time that they've beaten two of the Southern Hemisphere powerhouses in one calendar year. So they'll really be up for it. So I'm really, like Sim says, looking forward to it. We'll be back on Sunday.
Imagine if they beat us as well, like the kind of
Imagine.
year we'll have had. By the way, their coach went down to the Stormers earlier, just before the URC began. He's
Yeah.
big mates with Darby Snyman and Dobbo. So if we do lose, we know exactly who to go to and say you gave them all the family secrets. Poor Dobbo and
Yeah.
Darby Snyman. Those oaks are gonna owe us a lot if we lose.
They're gonna have to find homes in Italy
Yeah,
after
exactly.
this.
The
But
problem
it's
is
gonna,
Dobbo would love it. The problem is Dobbo would love
yeah,
it. He'd
yeah.
fit
Him
right
and
in,
Mallet, they always talk about it as well. So he's another of those connections. Yeah, but looking forward to it. We'll catch up on Sunday again after the match. Looking forward to it, Sim.
Yeah, me too.
Cheers, everyone. Go Boca, Forza Italia. Welcome back to That's a Rugby Union show. Well, what a week it's been.
He's playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about.
It's not this rugby union show. It's that rugby union show.
Sweet.
All right, boys. That's